And I remember having a client once who, as soon as I started talking about that, he said that is directly opposed to what I understand through my church. And he just switched off just like that. It was such a shame. And I thought, if I'd have known that, if I'd have understood that, I could have missed out that bit and just gone straight to emotional hijacking and how that happens. So let's start at this point then. So we can see that the brain has got 3 layers. And in here we have got the mammalian brain, that's the centre of the emotions, an older part of the brain, and here we have the neocortex of higher intelligence. And it's true that most of the connections from the emotional brain to the neocortex are on the right-hand side of the head. And most of the rational, logical thinking brain is on the left-hand side of the head. And the truth is, the 2 hemispheres don't work optimally at the same time. What you want to see is you want to see, when you're nice and calm, the rational brain in the driver's seat and the emotional brain under the control of the rational brain. That's when you're nice and calm. But what starts to happen is, the more you become emotional, the more the emotional brain becomes aroused and it starts to elevate. And it gets to a point where it starts to switch off rational thought. And I call this the dimmer switch effect. So the more emotional we become, the less rational we are able to be. Now there's a very good reason for this emotional hijacking, and that is, it really is a lifesaver for us. So if you've got a bus hurtling towards you in the road, there is no time to make a list of all the options there. So emotional hijacking happens and you jump out of the way. So it's really important we don't lose the mechanism, but what you don't want is for the emotional brain to be in charge of your everyday life. And people need a way of calming that emotional brain down. And the great way to do that is through the relaxation response. You can breathe the emotional brain down. We've known for a long time that if you allow the out-breath to be longer than the in-breath, you can't help but calm down. And it's all to do with the autonomic nervous system. When we breathe in, we use the sympathetic nervous system, we tense. When we breathe out, it's the parasympathetic nervous system, and we relax. But if you count and breathe at the same time, you are having to use which part of your brain? The rational brain. To count, you have to use the rational brain. And so you're elevating the rational brain, and because the 2 hemispheres don't work well at the same time, now the rational brain ends up back in charge and the emotional brain settles back down. So it's a great way, for instance, to stop things like panic attacks, to focus on the breathing, to count the breath, and while you're doing that, the panic, the anxiety settles down, and so it works for anger or any high emotional arousal. If you count and breathe, you are engaging your rational brain, and the emotional brain settles down. Now, what you don't want to do is wait until you're in the middle of a panic attack to try and do this breathing. You need to do it regularly. And there's a very good reason for that, and it's to do with background stress. Now, most of us have got background stress. We have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. There's a things to do list. But if it's nice and comfortable, it's down there, it's a long way away from screaming pitch. But if you start to worry about anything and ruminate, then it starts to come up bit by bit by bit, until in the end, if that's screaming pitch and that's your background stress level, there's hardly any room to navigate. And so you need to start to increase that space. And a great way to do that is to breathe it down every single day. Every time you do the breathing, you knock adrenaline out of the bloodstream. And so your background stress level goes down a little bit. Having gone down, it stays down a little bit. When you do the breathing again, it goes down again, and it stays down again. Okay? So what you're doing is, you're building up spare capacity. So that when you encounter stresses and strains of everyday living, and your stress level goes up, it's still a long way away from screaming pitch. Clear?
When you say do 7-11, when working with children, do you reduce that number? Is that too much for them?
Well, what I tend to say to people is, find the count that's right for you. It's called 7-11 breathing because that's what the human gifts people call it. But for many people, it might be 3 and 4, or to find the balance that's right for them.
Also, with, I can't remember what it is, but when you do the 7-11 breathing or 4 and 8, whatever it suits, it changes the oxygen levels as well. Can you remember what that is? I can't remember.
It alters the exchange of gases in the bloodstream.
Yeah.
That's what it does. And the truth is that when we get tense, our breathing changes as a result of anxiety. But when we breathe incorrectly, that produces the symptoms of anxiety. And if you're not careful, you can get into a situation of chronic hyperventilation where your exchange of gases in the bloodstream are out of balance, and so you get fight or flight symptoms. And then, of course, people become concerned about that. It makes them more anxious, and the breathing just continues to be incorrect. So practicing the breathing is one of the best things you can encourage your clients to do, whether they're coming for things like panic attacks, or whether they are working in industry and have to give presentations, or just want to function at their best, want to be able to think more clearly, present more clearly, sleep better at night time. This is such an important technique, and that's why I want you to practice just making the case for the breathing to your client.
And it sounds fun.